share your.
So we can get people coming in.
When it works, it always works, doesn't it?
There you go.
Works 100% of the time, 60%. We had quite a few signed up today, but I know we're a little bit after the time. We've got quite a few people in here. Rick, maybe it's worth doing introductions and getting things going.
Okay. Let me get organized here.
Sorry for the delay for the people that are coming in, the attendees coming in. We're technical difficulties.
Hello, everybody, and sorry for a little bit of delay there, just to get everything organized before we started the session today. I'm Rick Sterling, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about IMCanadaConnect before we got started today. This is an all-chapter, Canadian chapter thing that we're doing with IMCanadaConnect. Every chapter is going to have at least one presentation this year, so we have a complete year of presentations across the country. Each chapter has a couple of liaisons that get information and meet on a regular basis, and they will be able to get the information out to all of you as to the next sessions that are coming up. Just a little plug for the other learning experience available too, which is called Learn With Us, which Western IM puts on. And you could sign up for that. It's a purely learning experience. You could sign up for that on the westernim.com site and look up Learn With Us and sign up for the Learn With Us sessions. The next one of those happens on the 30th of this month. Now I got Pat and Jennifer with us today to do the presentation. I'm really looking forward to hearing it. I'm going to do a little front end about Pat and Jennifer, if that's okay. Pat is a career records practitioner, actively involved in the records and information management profession since 1975. Pat, you were just about 12 at that point, I know. Pat has been an ARMA member since 1977. Well, that kind of gave it away, didn't it? Her career took her from managing a mailroom at the Provincial Motor Vehicle Branch to a records officer at the Provincial Archives, where she was involved, or where she evolved from that position to a records analyst until 2001. Where she took on the Department Records Manager at the NB Provincial Department of Finance until 2014. Some of Pat's accomplishments include the development of the first records retention schedule for administrative records, and the first classification plan and retention schedule for administrative records for departments and agencies in the province of New Brunswick. That was in 1987. She created the New Brunswick Government Records Network for records staff in departments and agencies, and she and the team at the Provincial Archives developed records management courses for the records staff at Government of New Brunswick. Pat retired from Government of New Brunswick in 2014 after 42 years of experience, and then she came to NB Power in 2019 as a consultant, actually, at that time, Pat, and then she joined the NB staff in 2020, and she's updated her RIM governance and is currently working on updating corporations' records retention schedules. So Pat has been involved in Chapter Region and International Board of ARMA International. She served as a committee member of the ARMA International Education Foundation, and she is currently Regent. That for all of you that don't know, Regent equates to Poobah for the Institute of Certified Records Managers. So if any of you are going for your CRM, Pat is actually the regent of the ICRM and on the Canadian editorial board of SAGES. She remains active in the New Brunswick Government Records Management Network. Pat's a proud grandmother with 4 beautiful grandchildren and happy to spoil them when she can. I'm sure you do, Pat. Just a quick personal note, Pat, when I was region manager in Canada for a couple of terms, Pat was my region coordinator for Eastern Canada, and then she took over and became the region manager for 2 terms in ARMA International as well, region manager of Canada for 2 terms. And Jennifer, who I've known for quite some time as well. Jennifer has worked in records and information management at NB Power for over 30 years. As a senior analyst, she plays a key role in the development and implementation of the RIM program at NB Power, specializing in developing corporate classification plans and retention schedules. She was instrumental in developing a corporate communications platform to aid in the education and training of employees in information lifecycle management. With NB Power moving to the cloud in 2020, Jennifer's many years of experience have been an asset to the planning and implementation of the migration of content from previous SharePoint versions to MS Teams SharePoint Online platform. And Jennifer hobbies, and I've always known Jennifer's main hobby is something you don't hear very often, Jennifer, is dog sledding. Jennifer is a dog sledding person, kind of an amazing hobby, I think, with her husband and her fur babies. I'm so glad to have you both here today. This is the second presentation of our IMCanadaConnect, and the recordings for these will be available on the. We'll be sending out links to the recording after the fact for those that couldn't attend. So very happy to have you both with us today. And I'll turn it over to Pat and Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Good afternoon, everyone. I just took a list of some of the attendees that were that are online here, and some very familiar names. Glad to say hello and connect again. Also, I'd like to thank Rick for the opportunity to introduce you to Records and Information Management here at NB Power. Jennifer and I will jointly present today's session, and I understand if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we can address them after the presentation. On a personal note, I want to thank Rick and Western IM for hosting this presentation, and to you, Rick, for taking the lead on preserving our Canadian presence in ARMA, especially now that the Canadian region is no longer. So thanks again, Rick, for all the work. And as I say, we'll definitely try to keep this ball rolling with respect to having a presence for ARMA in Canada. Excuse me. And yes, I do have 4 grandbabies, and they're all very special. One is celebrating her 9th birthday today, so we're going to party on tonight. So that should be fun as well. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here if I can put this my screen.
DC.
See if we can do this. Screen share. Eric, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, looks good, Pat.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. So records and information management, one of the goals for us here at NB Power is to be compliant to both internal and external authorities. And as a Crown corporation in the province of New Brunswick, we're subject to provincial laws and regulations such as the Archives Act, the Right to Information and Protection of Personal Information, and the Evidence Act, to name a few. Also, the Energy and Utilities Board, which is an independent quasi-judicial board that is established by New Brunswick legislature to regulate the electricity, among other things, such as gasoline, pipelines, motor carriers, and that sort of thing. So as you can understand that, you know, all these things are driving forces to manage information in a compliant and authentic manner.
So records management at NB Power, we've been around for quite a few years. I started here in the 80s, but I think it had been going well before that, into the 70s. But we've had many evolutions over the years. Starting in the early 1980s, when we talk more around, you know, classification and retention of records, we adopted a subject-based classification code to help us organize and manage the files relating to, at the time it was the construction of our nuclear generating station here in the province. This classification code, it worked very well for classifying our engineering and administrative hard copy records through the 1980s and into the 90s. But starting moving into the 2000s, and we were moving into people storing documents on shared drives and things like that, we now fell under the Provincial Archives Act. Previous to that, we were kind of free to manage our information and records however we wanted. But after sometime in the 2000s, we fell under the Provincial Archives. So that meant we had to adopt a function-based classification standard, which was used by the provincial government for classifying the records and approving our retention schedules. This function-based classification plan allowed us to arrange our records based on business functions and the activities that are required to carry out the functions. This type of classification, it used far less classification codes than the subject-based plan we were previously using. So it did make things a little easier. Moving forward, we do still use a function-based model, and the current corporate classification model, we refer to it as the NB Power Information Model, or the NBPIM. And the NBPIM it's a revised version of the function-based classification hierarchy, and it's a better representation of the current business functions specific to NB Power. In this model, it works well in bridging the latest versions with Microsoft Teams and SharePoint with our third-party records and information management software that we're using to manage digital content.
So everyone knows the definition of insanity, and that's doing things the same way over and over again, expecting different results. And it's no different with records and information management. When you go in and you put a plan together and you say, you know, you must do this, this, and this, and you tell them to do it the same thing, but the compliance is not there. So we had to look at looking a little different, if you will. And what we come up with a plan to do, and these were objectives, is that we were going to manage information in all formats, and to align with the organizational culture, which is, you know, somewhat, I would say unrestricted, if you will, but to allow illusion of freedom for business and allow areas to choose where records reside. So giving the business areas the freedom to choose where they wanted to manage their information, and to also to be compliant with laws and regulations. And we were able to strike a balance between no information governance at all to just enough, without imposing some strict rigor to the business areas. Our records and information management model continues to be rolled out to business areas, and it's usually at the business areas' request, and a little bit of our persistence as well. So meeting our records and information management objectives is that we put some framework in motion. Our NBPIM, which is our NB Power Information Model, as Jennifer said before, it's a functional classification that describes the activities, the transactions, the retentions that are relating to the business functions. The nice thing about the NBPIM, it allows us to update the classification as business areas evolve and programs change. And we've been experiencing that right even this last few months, that various business areas are moving towards other functional areas. For example, the records management went from the innovation branch, the innovation division, went to customer care, believe it or not, and then now we're back in with digital technology. The nice thing about our NBPIM, it allows us to take and go to various parts of that particular document and use what we need. So we haven't had to change too much of the information model. We've just basically had to take and revamp our filing system, if you will. So one of the things that Jennifer and I are really work towards is to create customized file plans for the business areas that are mapped to the NBPIN, just as I mentioned before. We used to call them content models. People didn't seem to like, or there was a stigma attached to file plans. But you know what? You know, if it's a duck, it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's going to be a duck. So it's a file plan. And people are happy with that. And we work with some key individuals in each business area that will make sure that the minimum amount of controls are put in place, such as required metadata, perhaps maybe some key dates in order to trigger retentions, that sort of thing. And that's how we get the business to be compliant with corporate, provincial, and regulatory requirements, if you will. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here. Can I just go back for a minute? Previous there we go. I have another page. Our education and awareness is a critical component to the records and information management program and the success of that. We've created a communication site that houses all our framework, our best practices, our policies, our standards, our NBPIM, and any type of links that we need for training for records and information management. And to support the use and help employees maneuver teams and channels in SharePoint Online, which is a big part of our work here, we put in place some how-tos and some best practices, which are posted to that site as well. Again, too, a lot of persuasion and effort on our part. We're reaching out to all employees with tools to help them manage our electronic information.
So if we take a kind of deeper look into the actual, records management program at NB Power, we have basic 7 components that really make up the delivery of the RIM program. So the next few slides, we'll kind of take a closer look at each component. And we're gonna, next slide, please. So if we take a look at our core records management services, the first one, we provide a digitization service to our core functional areas. For example, some of the digitized record series that we've done for some of the areas include for HR, all of the employee records have been digitized and are accessed through SharePoint. I think that's on-prem, not SharePoint, but it's SharePoint. We have the purchasing and procurement invoices and purchase orders for NB Power. They're all digitized and accessed through an in-house browser tied to SAP. We also do customer service. We do the water heater rental contracts. We digitize for them as well. We digitize a number through the nuclear or Point Lepreau stations and other generating stations. They're materials management, supply chain, goods receipts documents. And more recently, we have embarked on a project to digitize our physical semi-active files. So it numbers almost close to 200,000 files. So it's quite a project to embark on, but we're going to talk a little bit more detail on what that looks like in some further slides. We also still manage physical files. So we manage the existing semi-active files that have not yet been digitized. And we provide the service, we index, we file, and we retrieve these files. They're stored in, we have multiple storage repositories, including a vault, climate controlled vault here at the head office for our vital records. And then we have other offsite storage areas, including some of the plants and regional offices as well. And of course, we always we have the disposition and retention of all these files that's performed by our staff. We also maintain the confidential shredding at NB Power. It's a shredding contract for all the areas. So we have the shredding boxes available in all of our different sites here at head office, as well as, again, our offsite offices. as well. And that includes the destruction of computer hard drives. And we also do forms control. So we ensure that the forms generated as Word templates to be used by the various functional areas are registered to ensure standardization. We just wanted to also note that NB Power is going through a work plan optimization program where there's I guess some employees are being offered the chance to have an early kind of retirement, and we will actually be losing 4 of our staff. So, you know, we've been working with the groups to realign job tasks and level of services, but we're confident that these core records management services that we have in place won't be impacted too greatly. We're looking at, you know, trying to automate more of our services and utilizing SharePoint to do some of that.
Yeah, we're looking at this as more of an opportunity rather than, and a little bit of a challenge for us as well. But it seems like we've put a plan in place, and we're actually going to meet with our senior managers just to show them what we can do and explain what our level of service would be. It also gives the business areas the opportunity to take a little more control of managing their information. So sort of like teaching a boy to fish or a child to fish. They'll never be hungry. So we'll try that same sort of analogy, and we will be, you know, have some hands-on training for business areas to help them to be more productive and a little less reliant on these, especially the physical file management, sort of have plans in place. So we're kind of, as I say, we're kind of excited about the opportunity. We're hoping that it will follow through and be as successful as we think it's going to be. So that's our core records management services. Our next one is our RIM advisory services, and I think this is where some of the heavy lifting will take place once we lose our staff to this program. So we have Jennifer and myself lead this, and we're actively towards, right now is realigning some of the programs and services that we presently do. But, in any case, we still have, some real good our baseline work on the RIM governance and strategy, the NBPIM and file plans, our RIM guides and our best practices, some things like, for example, our employee record keeping responsibilities. And we're actually working towards having this as there's a standard, and there's also some training associated with that. We're looking towards trying to get this as mandatory training for selective individuals, and even perhaps everyone. So those are the things that we're looking at. Also, too, we're going to do some heavily rely on our RIM communication site, because it includes the file plans that are in place. It includes all the framework and the governance and the RIM guide, the best practices, and the contacts and the services that we do provide. So we're currently implementing an electronic records management solution that's going to allow us to manage records activities, the classification, the retention, the legal holds, etc., using third-party software. One of the requirements of when we purchase this third-party software is that we must be able to manage records in place. And that is, it seems to be the trend these days, that we, instead of moving them all into one repository, is that we can go to the repositories of choice and manage them there. So whether it's in your network drive, it's in your email, it's in your it's in SharePoint Online, Teams and channels, we need to manage all the records in all formats, and that includes paper as well.
So I had mentioned before about this the digitization of our physical files. So We just wanted to give you a little bit more background and detail, because it was quite a large project that we undertook. Starting in January of 2022, the Records and Information Management, we embarked on a project to test the feasibility of digitizing our semi-active physical content. With the help of our digitization team, the system was developed, procedures documented, repositories in SharePoint were established, and we moved it into production. Once the physical records are digitized, the content is then available to our clients in the Digital Record Center repositories, which are SharePoint Online sites. Based on each different functional area, there would be a Digital Record Center repository for that functional area. The records in the DRC repositories, they're managed, they are managed and the retention and lifecycle applied to the content using our third-party software. And once we digitize the physical records and the quality assurance has taken place, the physical records are securely disposed of. And we're working towards getting to the point that when users send any physical files to us going forward, we will not be filing those in a physical repository. They'll be scanned and put in one of these digital record centers. And it should be noted too that, you know, this was our first time to embark on using optical character recognition we have the Kofax capture scanning software. So this was our first kick at the can of using OCR, and it's working quite well. And this initial project, it was successful, and basically these digital record centers are now considered one of our core digitization services that we offer.
Yeah, and I just took a look at it, and we have almost 900,000 pages scanned in since we started this. So we're almost to the million mark, and that's a lot of paper. It really is a lot of paper, that's for sure. So the RIM advisory services, that's Jennifer and I, we play a big role in the Microsoft 365 platform and the governance and support. We were able to do an assessment of the requirements for records management with the Microsoft 365 platform, and how we did that, we were able to work on the Office 365 pilot and operational committee. And we wanted to make sure that we had processes and best practices and how-tos in place, so we would set ourselves up for long-term success. We drafted the terms of reference for the governance for the Microsoft 365 related work. We also did a tremendous amount of research and testing and that sort of thing on expiries and retentions, especially for chats and conversations. And we took a business case to our legal group and to our executive group for the expiry of chats and conversations, and considering the non-record. We're successful in doing that. We are also we have membership in the Office 365 or SharePoint teams and OneDrive governance committee, so we can take and review what Microsoft throws at us. And if anybody who's working with Microsoft 365, you know that they change. There's so many things that change. One week it'll be one way, and then the next week it'll be different. So we're able to, before we can test them out, we're able to shut them down, discuss it, see if it's a good fit for MB Power, and then move forward. So things like, for example, the whiteboard that they just put in place, or the shared channels, which were something we felt that we didn't have enough information. We couldn't actually govern that. We couldn't rightly govern it the way we should. So we turned those things off before they became live for the groups. We also were very instrumental in preparing content for our SharePoint teams training, our records management, and the records management aspect of it with respect to metadata and whatnot. these how-tos and the best practices and stuff, I think have been, we were really proactive in that, and we really believed in what we were doing, and we were able to promote them and have them established as really the proper way to do things in Microsoft 365 here at MB Power. We're also involved heavily in the migration of content from our SharePoint 2010, our old platform, to the new SharePoint Online platform. Both Jennifer and I serve on the migration project team, and we organize the content, help business areas organize their contract through site structure, customized file plans that identify the libraries and the folder structures and related metadata that's needed in order to manage the information. Training and education is really a key success factor here at MB Power. Our internal staff, and I'll just give you a little story about that. We have great internal staff, and they were mostly charged with the responsibility of digitization. So they did the document prep for anything that was to be digitized, the actual scanning and indexing, and then we had quality assurance put in place. And then we were able to safely securely destroy the physical copy and use the digitized copy as the official record. What they weren't as comfortable with, and a lot of them had a little bit of training, but they weren't actually using it. So we felt that there was a need to bump up their skill set, if you will, with respect to classification here at MB Power. We had made a couple of, we did some major changing with the MBPIM, the functional file plan. Both they didn't know how to classify, but they didn't really know how it worked in the MBPIM. So we were able to introduce that. We put a few cool things in, like we had a scavenger hunt on our RIM communication site, just as a team building exercise, and we were able to take and get them to source through the communication site the answers for all the scavenger hunt things we wanted them to find. And we had a little incentive. We gave them prizes, and it was a lot of fun, and they learned. And we warned them. We told them that to brush up on their skills, make sure they know where things are, and they all found it challenging. They really, really did. But they were learning while they were enjoying the actual exercise. We've also we did a couple of things. I guess it was a summer activity. We did a records management Jeopardy, which was kind of fun, and the group really got into it. And we also had a couple of workshops on classification, which we really the folks really had a heavy morning, if you will. It was surprising. And I was pleasantly surprised how well they caught on to it and how well they worked. So we have a few more things we want to go on file plan development. We want to do a little more on retention to give them some ideas of what some of the things that we do in advisory services here to come up with these retention periods and what types of research we have to do. And as well, too, we don't have a lot of folks that are I would say competent in our records management software that we're using. For the physical records, they do know that, but for the electronic ones, it's not as they're not as savvy with it, if you will. And so that's a plan for them to get themselves acquainted with that as well. So that internal records management training was something that's very important, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. One of the things in the business area, we wanted to make sure that we want to always continually promote records literacy, if you will, around RIM and within the corporation. We want to we make a presence through when they do some planning, and there's if a new systems are being developed, there's a document that business area has to complete. It's called the business design document. And these are for any new systems that they want built or want to procure. And one of the areas is there on that is that, what are some of the records, maybe residual things that come out of that, maybe some output or any type of records that are spun up as a result of the system. And we give them an idea of what we're looking for or facing. We also promote RIM through one-on-one sessions with staff at all levels. So we're very happy to take this show on the road, if you will. If folks are having a business meeting, we can hop on for a few minutes through our team meetings or whatever the case may be. Also, too, when we work with business areas one-on-one, maybe we will work at creating a file plan for the folks. We'll turn them on to the communication site and give them a view and help them, maneuver through that so they can get the information that they need.
Can you click on the link? See if it, we'll see.
I think this works.
We wanted to just show you what our communication site looks like.
Can everyone see our communication site?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so it did go to the
Yep.
to the web. Good. Okay.
So we created this portal so employees can access the information they require to meet their employee records responsibilities. And it includes everything from, what is a record to, sections on the file plans, our MBPIM. If you could scroll down just a little bit, Pat, just so they can see the front page first. So we've got all kinds of different pages and links around our RIM framework, around our governance, where we have the employee record keeping responsibility standards. We have digitization standards, policies. And then we've got some guides and best practices that we've developed out for them to, when they're working primarily Microsoft Teams and SharePoint are really the primary repository for records at MB Power. So we have quite a bit around that. And we also did create a CBT with our learning and change group. So, users have to register through the learning and change, and they can take that CBT. It's just a nice little 15-20 minute course for them, but it gives them quite a bit of the information that they need in order to meet the records management requirements. Now, if anybody was interested, we may be able to share that. We'd have to look into how we would do that with the learning and change group, but that might be something that we can share offline. If you don't mind, Pat, I'm going to get you to scroll back up a little bit because I thought it's worth looking into the MBPIM just to give you a quick view. So we have a page that describes what our classification model is all about. If you actually click on the link
Here.
I guess, either way would. And you can see we broke this into different record categories to make it easier for users to kind of understand, what record series would apply to what it is that they're working on. And we found in previous versions of SharePoint, what we tried to do was actually take, if you just open up maybe the business program specific categories. So ideally it was like, okay, here's the different categories. And if you're putting, documents in your SharePoint site and it relates to a particular function, then you would tag your documents according to the right function and activity. And we found that it just didn't work so well because it was kind of overwhelming and there's so many categories. And that's why we came up with the idea of using the file plans. So if you want to go back up and we'll just click on the
File plans.
Yep. And I'll get you to scroll down and I will take a look at one of the file plans, maybe the supply chain one.
Mm-hmm.
So when we work with the different areas, they already typically have their SharePoint site set up, or they're in the process of setting up their SharePoint site. So that's where we would come in and take a look at, what's the SharePoint sites, or in the case of a functional area like supply chain, they had multiple SharePoint sites. And then we want to get an idea, okay, what are the libraries, the document libraries that you're creating? What are you putting in these libraries? And then we work with them to be able to map back to that NBPIM, the correct record class that would map to their libraries. And then we can apply a property or a metadata field within those libraries that is defaulted to the right record class, and then with the right retention. And once that's set up and created, the users, the rest of the users in the group, they don't even realize we're doing records management, but at least every time they're putting the documents in, they're being classified correctly. And it makes sense to them because they've told us what record class works for them. And they're compliant because they're using a standardized record class from the NBPIM. They're not just making up their own classification as they go. And the file plan also will identify in some cases, depending on the trigger for the retention, we may need another property that needs to be completed in order to trigger that retention, such as file close date or file close status, or contract end date, or something to that effect. So the file plan really is useful for us. It's useful for the team when they get new employees. They can review the file plan with them so people understand what the sites are used for, what documents go where on the site. It's also useful if there's right to information or questions from our utilities board hearings. Again, it can show where and how we're organizing our information. If you want to go back to the site, Pat, site. And yeah, so the site, it just has, we have FAQs, we have our contact names for our departments and stuff. So it's a nice, we've had a lot of positive feedback for it, and we're always kind of looking to make changes and update as need be.
And as I say, like for example, our Microsoft Teams SharePoint Room framework, like a lot of these guides will give you a lot of information that you can glean from. So for example, here it shows all the best practices that we have. So some on OneDrive, on OneNote, on chats, conversations, posts, and Teams, and they all sort of carry the same message. So for example, I'm just going to click onto one of these, and it shows you. They're all one pagers, and they just give you enough information on what it is about this. And this is sort of the most simplistic one that I could think of now. But anyway, it just shows that they have an expiry of 90 days and for the chats, and they have a 24-month expiry on channels. And it's just the core information that they need to have about that as well. So I'm just going to see if I can go back here on here and back to communication. Okay. Okay, so
Get the bottom presentation.
yeah, I'm trying to get there. So maybe here? No. Bear with me here, folks.
The PowerPoint. There you go.
Okay.
And then next slide.
There we go.
There you go.
So for 2023 and beyond, a couple of things that we want to, oh, where did that go now? There we go. So we want to keep our framework current by taking a deeper dive into moving to a fully compliant corporation. So are we there yet? No, but this is what our goal is. We make strides every day by being, being available, trying to make sure that the business areas are comfortable with their records management and how they manage the information. We have we have all levels of compliance. We have someone who takes this, and runs with it, and you can tell that they get it right away. We have others that we have to maybe handheld a little more than we would like, but we still manage to get, what we need. It's a kind of, as I say, it's good enough records management, and it's perfection in my mind. That's for sure. Our NBPIM will still be our all-inclusive classification for unstructured records of the corporation. And our goal is that every business area will have a records or a file plan that's tailored to the business, that is always mapped up to that, the record classes, and the codes, if you will. So they're always, they're classified. And that's one of the things that we need, especially for digital content, that when they identify the record class, that's one of the ways that we can classify, and that we know that our third-party software will go and identify with it and classify it properly. Our retention review, we're still working very, very hard at that. We're probably 75% there. In fact, I think it's tomorrow we meet with some of the executive folks on some pretty high level records. So we're excited about that, hoping that will work, and we'll be able to present that to the provincial archives for approval. And we put a plan in place that we will submit with a concordance table any new additions or deletions or whatever to the NBPIM. So we'll always be compliant, and we'll always have an accurate representation of what NB Power's corporate holdings are. Also too, we are committed to working with all business areas to identify personal identifying information using NBPIM to document that. And we're partnering with our legal group on that because they're taking the lead on that. But we want to make sure that, we work together and work as a team and to get that, because this is a big thing here at NB Power right now for the retention of personal information. And I think, worldwide it is. It's one of the things that we acknowledge that we have to be more respectful of. We also continue training and awareness with an enhanced protocol, such as formally declaring a record. This is our next frontier. Again, too, I talked about NB Power's culture, and as I say, we're moving forward. It might be a snail's pace, but we are definitely moving forward, and it'll be just one more thing that we can add to them, and making sure that the electronic record that we have is immutable, discoverable, and unalterable. We also want to partner with other NB Power business areas to clean up redundant, obsolete, and transitory records. There's a little bit of training and a little bit of knowledge that has to be transferred over, but we want to make sure that they can clean up their documents easily and be assured that they're being compliant when they do their dispositions. And of course, the realignment of staff responsibilities as we move to a more digital environment. As I say, is when we know there's some opportunities there to digitize, to do things smarter, and using technology to make things work better, we're all for that. So those are the things that we're looking forward to at the end of the day. Basically, that is our presentation. I just can't believe we're almost at the top of the hour.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, if anybody would like to add questions to the chat, we can kind of touch on them as we wrap up here. But for now, Rick, do you want to ask any questions, or
I have some questions.
Yeah.
As always, I have some questions. So, just asking both of you, I know that because NB Power has a nuclear facility as well, and how demanding that is to try and deal with records management in a nuclear facility. How did that impact you in the records management area during COVID? Can you speak to that? Was it more difficult, very challenging? How did you deal with that in the kind of COVID times when people are working from home?
Well, I think really any of our plant operations were status quo. We still had to keep the lights on.
Right.
So there was a process in place. I do believe, as far as on records management is concerned, we had really put Teams, our Microsoft Teams, in place very quickly. And just before before the pandemic, we were launching that out to many, many folks. We had a lot of the framework put in place, but COVID kind of sped it up. Had we, in a perfect world, would we have liked to deploy it differently? Yes, but we hit the ground running, and we kind of, as I say, this is what Jennifer and I worked on pretty much the first few months of COVID, is putting best practices and talking about expiries and make, setting expectations for the use of teams and channels and that sort of thing, because we definitely had a challenge there we just did not want it to become the Wild West. And so we put some things in place, and we really hit the ground running when we said, okay, this is a collaborative space, folks. This is where you work. You've got 3 years. You want to keep those records, you put them in a retained records repository. Channels are not a retained records repository. And we've kept that analogy throughout, and it's been working so far.
I'll just add too, that when it comes to our plants and in our nuclear station, most of their official engineering and official records would not be stored within the teams in SharePoint. We have other in-house systems that they're using to manage their drawings, design documents, and things like that. So, we try to work with them to make sure whatever systems they're using, they are going to start to utilize more our MBPIM to be able to help classify. But they still use, for a lot of the engineering, they will still use that older subject classification code that I referred to. So they are still using that to code a lot of their engineering documents. And our intention is to have that level of the function code kind of applied at the top of that, just to be able to apply the correct records or retention requirements. So it's an ongoing thing with them. But
Thank you. I appreciate that. I had, and I know some other people probably want to ask some questions too, but I had one other question that's kind of important to a lot of the people I talk to across the country. And that is, do I do my records management in SharePoint using the Microsoft components, or do I manage in place? And if you could maybe speak to that as it relates to NB Power. And I know you're moving to an in-place management environment now. Was there a kind of a long-term thought process that went on there to?
Well, some of the requirements, obviously, in place records management, just wherever it resides. So if it's in our shared drives, it's in our it could be in your email, it could be in SharePoint Online, SharePoint on premise. Wherever it resides, we have to manage it. We found that the Microsoft records management component was not robust enough to be able to do that, because it couldn't address or our shared directories or physical records, that sort of thing. So when we wrote out our requirements, it had to address all that sort of thing.
And it also didn't address very well event-based triggers
for retention,
for using like Microsoft labels. That's really what they put in place to be able to even, you can do in-place records management using Microsoft and their labels, but we just found some of the testing that we did, it didn't really meet the requirements for us.
There would be an awful lot of manual intervention to try to get it to work. And so, and again, too, Microsoft has improved a little bit, but I think there's still challenges with the with the event-based triggers. And it can't manage physical records. It can't manage records stored in other environments as well. So that's the other main issue.
Well, thanks very much for that. I really appreciate you saying that. Sometimes I sound like a voice in the wilderness myself, so it's nice to have somebody else speak.
We tried to make it work. We really did. We did try, because obviously they bought the product and they didn't, not to have to buy another third-party software, which does not come cheap these days. That's the other thing. So for sure. But
Hey, we got a question here. Irene's got her hand up here. I'll allow you to talk there, Irene, if you want to unmute and ask a question.
All right, thank you so much. And just to let you know, for some of us, the chat is disabled. But anyway, my question is, I'm actually working with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, and New Brunswick Power is one of our sponsors. So what is New Brunswick Power doing around long-term digital preservation? Like, you know, especially on the nuclear side, because some of those records have to last for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Irene, we have NB Power has a digital standard that we have put in place that anything that needs to be digitized, this has to be digitized according to our standard, which is PDF-A. And as I say, it depends on if it's a film or if it's an X-ray or if it's a photograph or whatever. They're all identified, but that's the only thing that we've put in place as far as governance. And I will tell you is that Point La Pro right now, our nuclear station, but really it's not only our plant, it's all our plants really. They have, we have a long-term preservation. We don't have a strategy yet. We've not been actually asked to do it, but we recognize that there is a need to do
And
it.
I think they do have some of their processes. We're just not totally familiar with all the processes. We have a document control group here at NB Power that manages the engineering documents and drawings for the plants. And I'm not sure, we don't have all of the different steps and processes, like, and even to approve the drawings, there's, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the system that they use when they.
Oh, it's an engineering,
Yeah, for their PDFs and things. So they do have systems in place. I mean, we might be able to get more information on that and share it with you if you want it.
The only thing that we were really responsible for doing is setting the standard and developing out the standard for that, which we did, and it's been in effect for a couple of years.
Yes, you're probably going to get emails from me because my IT director, Tina Fowler, is actually on the call as well. We're trying to connect with all of the nuclear agencies and set up a community of practice to really understand and align some of our practices as we're developing governance and proper records management to really make sure it aligns, because at some point in time, some of this information may have to be shared back out.
Right.
And it depends on if we get the go-ahead to build that deep geological repository for Canada, which is interesting. So I will be reaching out to both of you and setting up a meeting. Absolutely. We've seen a lot of things we want to see if we can learn from your lessons learned and other things, and maybe expedite some of the work we're doing.
Yeah,
and we'll also include, because again, in some of these cases, I think some of the information you're looking for, it would be other people we could put you in contact with that would have more of the knowledge specific to what our nuclear plant is doing. They have like a records area as well within the plant. And we try to work with them, but I don't want to be the one to speak that this is exactly what they're doing with their records. So we can certainly get some more contact names for you.
Okay, great. And just one last question. Do they have to at some point in time declare their records, even though they're controlled documents, into your sphere of responsibility, or is it separate still?
sadly, no, not yet. And that's one of the things that Jennifer and I have both spoke about, is to getting them to formally declare a record, making the record immutable, that sort of thing. And it's sort of the next frontier in many ways, but the culture, I mean, when you go from with very little governance to a lot.
But I will say though, our nuclear is a little bit more structured, and they're using, and I may not be saying the right name, but it's EB, although I think it's called AssetWise now, the system that they're using. And I think there is, I don't know if they actually call it declare, but I think there's more processes and
Because they
steps
have,
in place in order to put the documents in there and know that that's the official version and revision that they're using.
some of those control documents are much more,
Yeah.
much more regulated than
Than the average
stuff that
other
we
bit
have.
functional areas documents.
And you know, and really, our focus these days have been corporate office because of LaPro is away, if you will. It's and they're kind of an entity of their own with respect to
Yeah, they're even
you
looking
know,
at other systems.
That's right.
potentially.
I mean, sometimes we don't even know that they're doing, you know, what they're doing. However, you know, we have been reaching out to these folks and we've offered, the thing about this is the RMPPIM will fit their needs as well. Some of the nuclear record classes have to be updated, but that's the beauty of it. We'll be able to do that as well. We've reached out a few times and we've got some legwork done. The big thing was that our asset, folks that run the asset wise and our our drawings and whatnot are conforming to our standards as well for format and resolution. And you know, it's a start.
Thanks, Pat. I just wanted to, because we're over our time right now. I just wanted to thank you both for your time today, and we're certainly Troy and I didn't introduce Troy earlier. Troy's one of my partners, the lead developer at Western IM, who runs the sessions. But we're happy to stay on, and if anybody has more questions and can afford to stay on, I don't know about Pat and Jennifer whether you're able to stay on a little bit or not.
Yes, we're fine with that. Mhm.
Okay.
Victoria had a question. I think somebody put down everybody's hand. So there's two Victorias. I'm not sure if you want to unmute Victoria. I think I got the right one. There you go. Yeah, go ahead and ask a question. We can't hear anything. It looks like you're unmuted, but we can't hear.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, we had issues at the beginning of this. Yeah, it also looks like we're having issues with the chat not working too. So we'll try to address that for next time. I think we turned off the QA and it also disabled the chat. We just wanted people working in one area.
Well, again,
here, okay, try that, Victoria.
Okay, I think that's working there now.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. Nice to see everyone online there. Just a question on staffing, I guess. How many members are on your corporate?
Oh, that was my fault. Unmute again. Sorry, Victoria.
Just wondering how many members you have as part of the corporate IM team. And do you have everybody contributing to Microsoft SharePoint sites, or do you have controllers in place? You know, how do you distinguish between something going in the system and things like that? Just like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, okay, well, we actually have 10 staff here now. We will be reduced to 7 by the end of April, by the end of March of next year. But they're primarily our digitization staff, and we're doing classification, the receipt of physical records, doing retrievals, that sort of thing. Victoria, the thing about our Microsoft and our Teams environment and the folks that are doing that is that our system, as I say, when we set up our file plans for each business area, that what they do, they have that specific metadata, and one of them is a record class. And then it might have associated metadata such as maybe an end date, especially if the retention is active period, or the status, it could be closed. And what happens is that our third-party software goes and crawls all those SharePoint sites, and it will take that and classify it. And we get reports that these full files and records have been classified using our third-party software, and we register it, and it gets registered into this system. And we can do reports and that sort of thing on that as well. So really on the business end, there's no real legwork that has to be done because it's all done up front.
Yeah, they're free, like the different areas are free to work in teams, and, you know, SharePoint as they want. As Pat alluded to earlier, one thing we did get our, I guess, the architecture, the DT architecture was to set a record class on the default document library for the team's channels so that it had that last modified plus 3 years retention applied to it. So even if all they're doing is working in their teams, it's still considered that collaborative space. And we know that there would not be any records in there. And if there is, I mean, it's being managed. And as Pat said, if they move their information to other SharePoint sites, then, you know, we make sure that they've got the right properties in place, and we don't even have to see it. It just comes into our third party software under the right record class.
And even if it doesn't have the record class in it,
It's
still
still going to come in, and then we can tell it'll come in as an undefined record class, and then we can tell which groups the documents belong to, and then we can go back and work with them and revisit their file plan and add to it and you know, classify documents at that time if need be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. Sounds like artificial intelligence.
Kind of. Try.
It's actually quite robust. I don't know if it's artificial
No.
intelligence. It needs some sort of property. And the nice thing about our software is that it can manage a site, it can manage a library, it can manage a document within it. If it has, you know, if we have the right properties put in place on our retention triggers and our classification, it will bring it in. Now, I say it'll bring it in, it brings the metadata in and it tells me where it resides. It keeps it in place, it keeps it in the SharePoint.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we don't grab it at all. It's still there. So if they modify it, it's on them.
Yeah, and it can use, like, if you're a company that is utilizing SharePoint, you know, with some of the more robust functionality around, you know, document sets and content types and things like that, you can even use those properties to set your record class. Unfortunately, NB Power was more, I guess, Wild West, that people were coming from shared drives and they're really still comfortable using folders and just the libraries, I guess, within. So we had to figure out a way to, you know, come up with some standardized property and have that controlled freedom, but at least have something that they had to put in place so that we could manage the records.
Okay, that was great.
Great.
you.
Carolyn, did you still have a question? I don't know if you're still here. Carolyn, did you still want to ask a question?
Thanks, Troy. No, Victoria asked my question. So.
Oh, she did. Okay, yeah.
Great, thanks.
Good. I think that's all the questions there for people that had their hands up. Do we want to maybe wrap up, Rick? I'll let you close it out. You're muted there.
I unmute myself, that'll be easier. Thanks again, Jennifer and Pat, for a wonderful presentation. And I really appreciate you coming to do that today. And thanks all to the attendees today for coming on and being part of our IMCanadaConnect. We will be having ongoing sessions on IMCanadaConnect and of course our Learn With Us series as well on an ongoing basis. I think for December, the plan for December is to do a bit of a just get together kind of session in December and do a little polling while we're on there to see what kind of topics we might want to hear as a group going forward in the IMCanadaConnect and or Learn With Us categories. So I think that'll be kind of fun. And of course, holiday season, nice to have a little bit of a get together so everybody can talk. So thanks so much again for being on, and we look forward to seeing you next time on IMCanadaConnect.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.